make predictions or anything of that sort in this current environment. That'll be difficult. And,
yeah, actually, I'll go ahead and share, Johannes, if you want. So, thanks. Okay.
There we go.
All right, can everybody see?
Yep.
Yep. Yes, we can.
Great. Right, so this is us. Meet your speakers. So you already kind of met us a little bit on the phone, but yes, we're a couple of CMOs that have been doing technology marketing for a long time. And I specialize in scaling startups. I've been doing this for about 20 years. And my contact information is there on the right. And I also wanted to mention that Dennis had posted a link to the deck. So if you want to see the slides or access them later, those are available to you. And Johannes, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, same. Been a CMO for quite some time. Heavy emphasis on information security, but also other sectors, medical technology, financial apps. And I have a process I call growth architecting. Basically, if you need to find out how to make the $10 million in net new business next year, where is it going to come from this year? And we take people through a structured process. And that seems to be selling right now as everybody's reforecasting. And so a lot of the experience that you're here today comes from real world examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Johannes mentioned, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go into some data, spend some time on survival tips, and let you access some resources. So that's our agenda for the day. So really what we wanted to focus on today was how do you figure out how to grow as the economy restarts? And the things that we're going to cover are really around the sectors that you want to think about, some budget considerations, thinking about your pipeline and your marketing, how you're adapting that, and then also aligning and driving sales, aligning with and driving sales. Anything you wanted to add to that, Johannes?
No, I kind of keep it interactive. So if you have questions, pipe in. Well, we'll go through the slides fairly quickly. In some cases, there's a fair amount of dense content. So
yeah, we're not going to cover every point.
We're not cover everything. The presentation is available afterwards. Follow up with us if you have questions, and then by all means interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. We're available to talk to everybody on the meetup. So, all right. So let's just look at some data. HubSpot has put out some data looking at all of the companies that are customers of theirs, and they've looked at an overall deal created and closed rate since sort of before the pandemic really set in and since then. So if you look at this chart, it's really talking about starting in January and moving through last week or a week or so ago, I guess. And basically what you're seeing is that big dip as everything goes into lockdown and everything's kind of acknowledging that we're really in a pandemic. So this is more just a general idea. Certainly this is just HubSpot's customer data set, so it's not necessarily reflective of everything, but it's something to think about in terms of what does the scale of that change look like. And then I think we looked at that data also reflects deals that are created by region and deals that are closed by region, which is the next slide. But that's to sort of show you that every region is slightly different in its timing and also the depth of the change. And so this is an opportunity for you to think about, what regions are best for you to be creating deals in right now. And you'll see that LATAM and EMEA have kind of the biggest drop-offs here. And even though we're feeling a lot of pain and strain and change in the US, it's not necessarily the peak of what's happening globally. So in terms of deals that are being closed by region, those charts look a little bit different, but it's still LATAM and EMEA that are struggling the most. And so as you think about what you have in your pipe, you might think about that regionally and think about how can we address what's happening in each of those regions and be more reflective of that. How are we going to be able to close better? And then also there's an opportunity to look by industry. So I don't know, Johannes, did you want to talk to these?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two things that are interesting. So one is 3 or 4 slides back when Jill showed the overall impact. When you actually work out the math and you multiply, the drop in deal volume, and you multiply this chart, and you multiply the closure rates, for those of you that are sort of into the math of it all, you multiply those two numbers and you integrate, you add up the area under the curve, it gives you a total amount of the disruption. So for the HubSpot data set, which is not necessarily representative of the country at large, but I do think it's reasonably typical, this would suggest a permanent loss of business of about 8% annualized. So this approach gives you a way to sort of do a similar analysis in your own pipeline and sort of say, okay, the reduction in deal volume and the reduction in closure rates, and multiply that out over the disruptive months, add that all together, you can go to the board and say best guess estimate is we're going to lose 10% of the original total. So that's one so what. And the second so what, if you go back to the vertical slide, 2 or 3 slides down, Jill already talked about the breakout by region. The one that's also interesting is, of course, what are the trends by industry? And again, both deals created as well as deals closed. And you can see that there's a significant difference between verticals. This also very much echoes what we're seeing with the customers that we're currently working. In some cases, they're like, bring it on, this is great. And
Yeah,
in other
some are
cases,
actually going up.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see it here. I mean, computer software and manufacturing seems to be doing reasonably well. Consumer good is hanging in there, but then travel and entertainment is going down. And my guess on entertainment, it's less the Netflix side of the industry. It's more the theme parks and those things that are going down.
Yeah, I think.
But again, apply this to your own data set. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've definitely seen that each vertical is a little bit different, and something like the consumer industry, that's gone up just when the stimulus checks came out. So that sort of put a little boost there. So thinking about kind of those macro trends, but also those little micro events that are impacting things.
Right, and we're using the HubSpot data set just as a representative data set because it's out there in the public domain, but the suggestion is to do a similar analysis for your own pipeline and break it out by region, break it out by vertical, and so forth.
Yeah.
And same trends, you can see closure rates are going up in 3 key sectors. In fact, in some of them, they're already above normal, like the tech industry, and from the speed at which some of my friends that lost their jobs are regaining jobs. My guess is that you're going to see a net shift within the industry, but overall the industry is probably going to do relatively okay.
All right. So just a data point around budget trends. Gartner came out with a report on marketing budgets and said that about 65% of CMOs are expecting moderate to significant budget cuts, with 33% of those being significant. And we thought about whether this was an interesting data point or not to share, but what we decided was that it's really an opportunity. I think we both, Johannes and I both look at this as a crisis creates opportunities. And so it's really an opportunity to think about what you can do and be proactive versus just responding to the trends. So I think that trend is really a lot less important than what's happening in your individual business. And Johannes had mentioned that funding is a competitive dimension. So it's an opportunity to potentially invest in marketing in specific areas, specific regions, specific verticals, or specific technologies, or whatever that might be, potentially to be proactive and more competitive, to go to steal share. So
yeah, sorry, to add to a concrete example, one of my clients, we're putting together a proactive predatory campaign to take out a weekly finance competitor. I know it sounds Machiavellian, but them's the shakes. That's how the world works. And so I think to some extent, there's these opportunities, because if you do have a deep pocket and the other side doesn't, now it's time to get market share.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, reflective of this idea that we have that this is marketing's moment in a lot of ways. So this is a really great opportunity for marketing to step in and really drive business and strategically move the business forward. So if you can do that from a competitive standpoint, not only is your job more secure, but the company that you work in and your sector is going to be stronger. So it's all to the good. All right. So now we were going to get into some survival tips. And as Johannes mentioned, these are things that are based on what we're seeing working with clients right now. But they're also just sort of good best practices, I think, that people can be doing and thinking about at any time. But particularly now, it seems like a great idea to be doing some of these things. So we built these in 2 tranches. So this one is really around doing the numbers. And so Johannes, you want to talk to this set of things that we're going to be sharing?
Yeah, we'll talk about 3 things, kind of forecasting and reforecasting, protecting the existing pipe and existing customers, and then optimizing spend. All 3 areas that people are doing right now. So maybe if we can get into the next slide. We already talked about looking at sort of your macroeconomic environment, which verticals, which locations, and so forth, which company types are prospering, which ones aren't, to shift attention and therefore marketing spend from one group to the other. And the goal really being, how do I protect the customers that I have? That's clearly priority number 1. Secondly, the ones that are in the pipeline, can I still close them, go through some sort of a prioritization process? And this is typically a mix of top-down as well as bottom-up, working with the sales guys. And then thirdly, whoever is now not ready to buy, are they either going to buy later, in which case I put them on a nurturing track, or they ran out of money. Sorry, game over. The deal's never going to happen. And that gets us back to that 8 or 10% overall loss estimation that we talked about in the beginning. And those are the kinds of things, both interacting with the board and the company leadership in terms of what projected overall impact, as well as working with the sales guys on a bottom-up basis, deal-by-deal basis specifically, is important so that you get a sense for what's my funnel doing. And that's a fair amount of homework. This is a lot of detailed planning. And in some cases, several organizations right now are actually heavily investing in CRM infrastructure, because when the times are great, you can shine that stuff on. Now they're flying blind, so they're actually starting to get into collecting better data.
Yeah, that visibility is so important right now. So,
next
okay.
Slide.
So next slide.
Then the next one, as we already talked about, protect what you have. I mean, and we talked earlier, there's, my guess is about around 20% of the market that's realizing that, chance favors the prepared mind, and they're going in attack mode. That means somebody's going to come after your customer base and says, okay, I got lots of money, I can, give away promotions, I can spend on marketing and so forth, I'm going to take market share. So clearly, number 1 priority is retain your customers, and also then go through, the entire pipeline. And this is sort of where it's important to intensify cooperation with sales. It's always a prickly thing, sales and marketing are 2 different cultures, but in order to make that work and really figure out where and how do I, ward off competitors, where are my threats going to come from, which deals can I close, which ones do I put on nurturing, which ones do I walk away from, that requires this ongoing interaction and with the sales guys, but also then these nurturing programs, new offers, new messaging, and so forth that are required to retain existing customers. A lot of effort goes into that right now.
Yeah, and do you want to just recap what you were talking about the estimating the area under the curve there for reforecasting? I think that deserves a little, just do the formula one more time for people.
Yeah, I mean, in practical terms, there's sort of the top-down macroeconomic thing that I went through earlier, but bottom-up, you're going to get a forecast, whatever, 100 prospects in there with estimated close dates and estimated close values and estimated close probabilities. Basically go through with the sales guys a bottom-up effort and say, is the date going to push? Is the likelihood of closure rate going to push? And is the deal size going to reduce? That gives you a new, add that all up and compare before and after. And then you can bucketize that into the ones that are, let's hold on to the ones we've got. The ones that are sort of iffy, can we offer them a promotion, new messaging, 15 months for the price of 12, that kind of thing. And then which ones are the ones that we need to walk away from and put those on a long-term nurture track, or if they've gone out of business, it'll never happen. And just do this on an ongoing basis, because literally this stuff updates on a weekly basis. And then last but not least is optimize spend. I mean, a lot has been written about, let's not go to events and let's go digital marketing. And that's sort of, there's a DAW there, but within that, for example, I find a lot of organizations, especially the smaller ones, don't really know how to leverage LinkedIn and use that for nurturing and use that for low cost outreach as well as low cost nurturing. So can you dial up your LinkedIn spend? How do you integrate LinkedIn spend and Google spend? A lot of people are used to spending a lot on Google ads, but how do you actually make the two talk to each other so that you're not advertising to an entire area on Google, but you're only advertising to the community that you're actually marketing through LinkedIn? So there's little things like that. Also within content development, in a lot of cases, you have to develop new content, and that requires budget, that requires production time, both content with a big C, which is those thought leadership stuff, as well as content with a little c, email copy, LinkedIn invites, blogs, those kinds of things. And again, just continue to update that. That's one of the things that I do. I have a model where I basically model every organization, and then they can do a rebudgeting on the fly. And that allows them to shift their spend to the stuff that performs, which is the other piece about this. Right now, nobody knows what sells. And I have a friend, she's in here's an e-commerce business, and she sells reenactor clothing, like period clothing, Victorian and World War II and so forth. Guess what's the hottest seller? World War I leather pilot helmets. Who would have thought? And, how do you find this out? Every industry has these little things where stuff goes up and stuff goes down, and certain messaging works and certain messaging doesn't. And so then, being able to adjust forecasts and adjust budgets on the fly and putting the infrastructure in place so you can do that is a key to success.
Yeah, and I think it is really important to be proactive about this. So once you've reforecasted and you kind of know what you're trying to drive to and what the gap that you need to fill, you've got to address that from a budget standpoint and really make sure that the board and your management team isn't just telling you what the budget is, but that you're telling them, this is what I'm going to need in order to meet these goals, and this is how I'm planning to meet it. So it's part of that just rigor, I guess, of looking through what's working and what's not. Where can I divest in channels that are maybe more expensive, or take your event budget, and how are you going to reconfigure that into other things that are going to work? So, but yeah, you just want to be proactive about it so that you're not stuck with a budget that's not feasible for what you need to do.
Yeah. But then there's also more qualitative things, and then Jill is going to walk you through that in terms of how do we adapt our marketing and promotions. No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're setting me up.
Trying to lead into the green section. So.
Hey, green section. All right. Well, so the second half of this, the first half is sort of do the numbers, like make sure you know what your forecast is, what's happening with your budget, other things like that. This one's really about adapting your approach to how you're going to market. So we obviously are facing some new realities, so you'll need to adapt your marketing. You want to think about promotion versus pricing, and you want to align and attack the market. So we're obviously both very bullish on attacking the market. So the first thing is looking at adapting your marketing. So obviously events, physical events not happening so much, digital events much more happening, digital marketing coming more to the fore. But really, it's important to rethink, just as you looked at your pipeline and your forecast, you really want to go back and think about your customer base as well and your prospect base. So who's your ideal customer right now? Has something shifted that you need to really take into account? It's not just business as usual. So who can buy right now in your portfolio of people that you can sell to in terms of your audiences? What verticals are most impacted? We talked about what geos are hardest hit and who do we sell to. So just thinking through that a little bit more. Again, it's legwork, but it's important to do. And then we talked about shifting for events, but and there's a lot being written right now about how to make better virtual events and how to do virtual events and other things. So there's a lot to look up there, but get creative with your virtual events so that they are well attended and they yield good results for you.
Yeah, there's actually, if I can interrupt, there's a lot of interesting content that's going out on how to sell virtually. I'm working with a small company. It's actually a Harvard Business Review startup. And the entire focus is on how do I leverage virtual sales meetings. And they're saying, Zoom and Google Hangouts and all those things are not sufficient to orchestrate sales meetings. How do you innovate this technology? So there's some interesting stuff going on there, for example, where you can go to the salespeople or you can go to your customers and offer them a new experience. that's virtual, and that makes you look different from the competition.
Yeah, and in many cases, it's an opportunity to make it more personal as well. So more customized and smaller venue and more interactive and all of those things. So yeah. All right. So next part is just in terms of marketing. Obviously, your messaging, it's time to change it up again. I think, the past month or two, people were really focused on messages around these unusual times and what are we going to, we'll get through it together and all of those things. And I think the market is starting to shift out of that. And it's important to start now planning your messaging to move out from that. So as the economy restarts and people want to get back to business, it's time to reshift your messaging again. And here's just some, ideas on things that you can do to change that up. The other thing is, again, to be proactive on your competitive positioning. So you really want to make sure that you're monitoring your competitors in media and on social and looking at their websites and seeing what they're doing. First of all, they may give you some great ideas about how to shift your services or what you're doing, but also you don't want to be caught flat-footed that they're making adjustments that you're not ready for. So it's really important to be monitoring for that, and an opportunity to work with sales to tap them to make sure that you are connecting on what's happening in the market. So those are the kind of most important things I think people need to focus on around adapting their marketing. And then promoting wisely. So this is just something to think about. I think people get in a little bit of a panic sometimes and they think, well, we're going to have to reduce our prices. And it's possible that you have to reduce your prices, but it's also possible to look at a different strategy, which is to think about this as really just a promotional period and a way to find ways to offer extra value instead of lowering your prices. And the rationale behind that is that once you've lowered your prices, it's really hard to get them back up. People sort of think, well, they did it for that price then, why can't they do it for that price going forward? So you want to find ways to sort of augment what you can deliver, even if it's the same price, but for a little bit more time, or adding, an extra service on top of what you're doing, but sort of keeping your core price structure as much as you can intact so that you don't have to go undo that and kind of fight against that in the future. So that's just something to think about. And it's also going to, of course, impact your pipeline. If you are repricing and lowering your prices on everything, you have to sell a lot more deals in order to make the same nut that you had to make before. So you want to resist that as much as you can and find ways to use the value opportunity to have more discussions with your clients and with your customers and your prospects, to find ways to connect with them and engage with them so they're more loyal. Your renewals will stay, and you kind of maintain the pricing level that you had as best you can. And then the last thing we've alluded to already, but this is the time, if ever there was a time to align with sales, this is your time. It is always difficult. They are two different cultures, and often there are political and technological reasons that, it's hard to connect with sales, but this is a really important time to do that. And again, just in terms of your careers in marketing and other things, the way that you're perceived as a leader in the organization, if you make that connection and you're successful at driving the communications and at driving business in this time, that will really help. It'll go a long way. Whereas if you kind of say, well, we're putting things over the transom and sales just isn't responding, that's not going to be very popular. So we're recommending a few things. One is to make sure that you've opened up the channels and that you're informing the sales reps. So bi-directional communication flow is really important right now. Sales is kind of talking to the market. They're sensing things faster than marketing can. So it's important to get that feedback flow coming through. But it's also important to make sure that you're updating and training sales regularly. So as you're shifting everything from week to week, the pipeline is shifting, the forecast is shifting, you're probably changing campaigns, you're changing your messaging a little bit. As you're doing all that, it's really important to make sure sales is moving along with you. So recommending just a lot of communication every week. Make sure they know what you're doing, what you're up to, and that you're training them on how to use the messaging that you're creating. So are they saying the same things in the market as you're trying to say? And is it working? So you want to also have that feedback loop on, I just can't get this message out. It doesn't work for me. People don't like it. You need that feedback right away so that you can adjust. And it's also important to keep everybody up to date on the C-suite and other parts of the organization, your product teams, et cetera, to make sure they know what you're shifting. So you're busy in your marketing corner doing all the work, but you got to make sure that you've communicated that out so people know what you're doing and they can appreciate that and contribute to it. And then lastly, that attacking the market and competitors. So this is, again, an opportunity. If you're monitoring, you might see some places that you can gain share. Somebody might be going out of business. It might be a acquisition candidate even, but there are opportunities to coordinate, cooperate, or compete more heavily now because of the market changes.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of my former employers, their key competitor just hired back their #1 sales rep who generated literally 40% of their revenue. And they basically threw a boatload of money at her and picked her off. And that's going to hurt. And so there's, before somebody does it to you, do it to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure that you're driving that change in a positive way for your company, for sure. All right. So that basically takes us through the survival tips section. Was there anything anybody wanted to ask questions about? We've got just a couple more slides, but we could take questions for a minute.
Yeah, so feel free to unmute yourself or put any questions in the chat area. I had a question. I didn't see an explicit mention of it, but what are you guys advising clients on account-based marketing?
Go for it.
I think there's two versions of it. One of them is there's the sales version of it and there's the marketing version of it. Marketing's usual version tends to be more the inbound marketing, which, you got to be all over that right now, where, if I can figure out emerging demand online through automated tools early on in the in the lead generation process, that's all goodness. It's difficult, it's sophisticated, and the problem with it is it takes a long time to get to work, which probably right now people don't have the budgetary patience for. On the sales side, the more sales swaying definition, which is more, we're going to go after IBM or whoever. Let's not just go after the 5 people we know, but let's have a coordinated attack. Again, that's I think that version is a little easier to sell, as long as you've done that triaging that we talked about earlier by region, by vertical, and so forth. Is this a worthwhile target to invest in?
Yeah, I would recommend.
Enter a little bit of both.
I would recommend jumping in there. If you're not already doing account-based marketing, and if marketing and sales aren't coordinating on that, I think that's fundamental, that marketing and sales should be coordinated on that. It's not one camp or the other, but if you're not doing that already, it's going to be a heavy lift in all of this turmoil, but you can certainly take one area, whether that's a vertical or a geo or just, a competitive opportunity or a promotional something, and do that together. So go after the market and say, look, this is where sales and marketing are going to coordinate. We're going to do a campaign and we're going to, monitor that through. We're going to train sales on it, and sales is going to execute on that. And we're going to see if we can get some lift in that. So I think it's a really, in some ways, it's a really good way to think about going to market right now, just because everything's so uncertain, and it allows you an opportunity to take things in smaller bites around your go-to-market strategy. So you can do some of your ongoing things, but to sort of test and see if you can make some lift in certain areas, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, there's a couple of great comments. Rich, he had to drop off, but he made an awesome comment. You can read it all, so I won't read it, but befriend your search team, SEO, SEM. That's a great way to early test. I mean, right now, again, who would have known that World War I leather helmets sell? But one way you can find out is you do online
keyword searches,
AP campaigns, email, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think hopefully that's on the slide, but that's definitely something you should be monitoring, is what's happening with your keyword searches. So that's a way for you to figure out what your messaging should be, and also any new verticals or new opportunities. So that's a great suggestion.
Also, along those lines, there's an interesting product called Crazy Egg. It's my latest favorite product. And what it does, it's really cheap, and you can implement it, and it'll tell you where people spend time on your website. Mm-hmm. And all the content that I thought everyone was reading, they're barreling right past it. All the pictures and the photos, they're looking at it. So, you get great feedback like that between SEO, SEM, keyword searches, and a tool like Crazy Egg. you now suddenly find out what people are actually interested in, what they're resonating.
Yeah.
And,
all right. Well,
not cutting marketing. Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the other comment about not cutting marketing. This is Marketing's Hour. A good friend of mine from business school runs Sequoia Capital, and they issued this email back in March. You know, one of the 3 things you got to cut is marketing.
marketing. That's
I
annoying.
feel like sending him an email. Are you nuts? But anyway, the climate. Yeah, Michelle added to it. Yeah, agreed. Sorry, go ahead. So.
No worries. So I just am conscious of the time. I don't know how many, how much time people have. So I'm trying to sort of walk the line there. But anyway, so we just wanted to kind of review. These are things to think about anytime, but certainly now. Which sectors you want to grow or slow, your budget considerations, understanding and protecting the pipeline that you have, optimizing and adapting your marketing, and then aligning with and driving sales. So those are kind of the top 5 things that we could recommend right now. And we also have in the deck a list of some of the resources where we got the data from today. So just so you have that, and also our contact information, our blogs are up there. So we definitely invite you to contact us if you have questions or want to talk about things or just connect. That's great. So
cool. We have time if you guys want to ask questions. If not,
yeah.
we're just as happy to get back to lunch.
Yeah, thank you for joining us in your lunch hour. Appreciate that. It's great to see everybody.
And Jill, I'm not sure if you want to put up that previous slide or the earlier slide, but maybe just reiterate where can people go to find each of you or find out more?
Sure. Yeah, let me go back to that one.
And actually, you mentioned earlier you shared this deck, but I think anybody who joined a little late, if it was in the chat, we would not have that link.
Oh yeah, I will share. Actually, yeah, I'll share it with everybody.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, and actually, it would be great to get some feedback too, to know if this was useful for people, or if there were other things they thought we were covering or would hope we'd covered. Anything would be great.
Sounds good. And there's a question, Jill, are you on Twitter?
I am. So yes, I will. If you go to my website, you can find it on there. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So yes.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah, again, Johannes and Jill, thank you for joining us today. We'll make sure everyone has a copy of your deck, and I think it was very useful.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, good.
All right. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.